Hi, this is Mark Arnold with yet another Fun Ideas podcast. And today we have a returning guest who's actually brought me many guests of musical taste and talent over the years. And his name is Charles S. Rosenay! Exclamation point, exclamation point. Okay.
Well,
Welcome back to the show.
great to be back. And it's just such a pleasure, Mark. I know it's going to be a fun interview. I know you're going to ask me probing questions, and I just can't wait to get into it.
I can sense your sarcasm a mile away.
No, not at all. Not at all. I don't have a
I shouldn't
sarcastic
make
bone in
myself
my
laugh.
body.
Anyway, because I've this is probably the best I've been in over a week because of allergies. So
Oh,
if you hear
my.
me kind of coughing and snarfing and stuff, which is why I do a lot of shows all at once and then I take a break because things like this happen. Anyway, all right. So you are back. You've written yet another book. Is this your third or
It
fourth?
is. It's
Third.
my third book. It's like sort of I don't want to say sequel, but it was inspired by my first book, which was the book of top 10 horror lists. And it's something I'm near and dear to my heart. It's the book of top 10 Beatles lists. The second one was sort of off the track. It was, as you know, a ghost stories book, True Ghost Stories of Connecticut, which didn't fit this top 10, celebrity book mode. But I'm back on track here.
Top 10 horror sites in Connecticut. I don't know. No.
My bathroom, my bedroom, my no, no, no.
So, I mean, you published Good Day Sunshine,
Yes,
a very popular Beatles fanzine back in the 80s, and
yes.
it was very well received. I have most, if not all, the issues. I even have your bootleg album you put out, and some of those cassette tapes you put out, all sorts of weird crap you put out way back when. I say, stop sending me this stuff. No. What made you arrive, other than the inspiration of the first book,
Yeah.
to this as your first Beatles book?
Well, it's interesting because this probably should have been my first book, Mark. I'm a Beatles guy. Everyone knows me as a Beatles guy. Everyone said, when are you going to do a Beatles book? But I never thought I would ever because I thought every book on the Beatles has already been written. What is there? What topic? What could I possibly come up with that, isn't already in print? It's back maybe 30 years ago when I should have done my first Beatle book. There was a handful, there was the Beatles Forever, there was Nick Schaffner, there was a handful of really great books, and everyone had those 10 dozen whatever great books. And then as the years have gone on, more now than ever, people like Michael Ventrella, it seems like anyone could put out a Beatles book, right?
Even
And
me.
even you. And they come out, and I have to get them because I'm a diehard fan. And I want to read, even if it's got one morsel that I didn't know or for whatever reason. But in this case, it wasn't a book for Beatle historians. It wasn't about, oh, did John actually go away with Brian on a holiday? It wasn't that. It was celebrities, rock stars, actors giving me their top 10 favorite Beatles lists. And it was so successful and so much fun and so well received in the horror field that I said, how can I not do it in the Beatles version of it? And it's interesting because, should this have been the first one? Yeah, maybe, I don't know. But what it should have been, Mark, is it should have come out a long time ago. I wish that I put this out in the days when I was close with Cynthia Lennon,
Oh yeah.
with people like Alan Williams, who was the Beatles' first, manager, Bob Wooler from the Cavern DJ, Sam Leach, all these people who were just so near and dear to me. And they were friends. They were a phone call or in those days not email, but certainly a letter away. And they would have jumped at the opportunity, to do a top 10 list for a book.
Hmm.
Sid Bernstein, oh my God, Clay Cole, people who are no longer with us. And so that part of it, that's the bittersweet part is yeah, I'm proud of the 64 celebrities and actors and athletes and all that are in this book. But I think of what could have been had I, had the urge. But, when I say I thought all the topics were covered, that wasn't the only reason. I'm the first to admit why I didn't put out a Beatles book prior, and that's because of the aforementioned Beatles magazine that you discussed, Good Day Sunshine. I was putting out 6 issues a year
Mhm.
for close to 20 years.
Yeah.
And if you have ever put out a publication, and I know you have, you know that there's nothing greater than getting that finished piece and smelling it and touching it and looking at it. But the work that goes into it
Yeah.
it's overwhelming. And for someone who's never put out, an 80-page magazine every other month, it's your life. You do other things in between, but that's the all consuming. And it's one of the few things in my life I did that never made money. I mean, thank goodness, everything I do has made money. But everything, well, actually, come to think of it, the books haven't either. When it comes to putting out printed word, I do it for the love of it. But Good Day Sunshine for all that time, I felt like I was putting out a book 6 times a year.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Well, at
every other
80 pages, yeah, it was like a slim volume, but still, it
yeah.
was
So
it
I
was bigger
thought,
than what I put out. I put out 24, 28 pages or something like that. You're doing 80, 100 pages. I'm like, oh my God. And six
and
times a year, not
and
four times a year. So
doing the editing, doing the graphics, doing the layout,
yeah.
typing, retyping everyone's things. We didn't have computers in those days, so it was barely a word processor. It was an old typewriter. But the love of it and the fan friendships that were made through it. And it was also networking. The way I justified that much work and that much effort was I'm doing conventions, I'm doing tours. This is a great way to get the word out. And it was people who got the magazine, loved the magazine. They got to know me and my personality through the energy of the magazine. And they wanted to come with me on tours and they wanted to come to conventions. So that was the bigger picture. Someone says, well, you're nuts. How can you do something for nearly 20 years and it not make money and it take up so much of your time? And it's because it led to other things, and it was a network, a bigger picture.
Yeah. I mean, I'd have to say probably Harveyville Fun Times did make money probably in the first 5 to 8 years, but then this silly thing called the internet took over and
Yeah,
distribution went away. And so I did it for another 12 years or so just on my own dime. And then it got to be a point, and I've said this before on the show, it's like, how much do I want to spend this month on publishing a magazine? you know,
yeah,
and so it got to the point where I published instead of 4 times a year, 3 times a year, then 2 times a year, then once a year, because I didn't want to fork over all that dough that I
yeah,
was not going to see again for
yeah,
anything. And then finally I just threw in the towel. I said, I've done it for 21 years. That's
yeah,
enough. So I
yeah,
get it.
yeah,
The book thing actually kind of relieves a little of the pressure, which is why I've written so many books. I mean, the way I do them, and you kind of do it the same way. You don't generally design your own books, you have other people do it. But even if you did want to design your books, you can do it. But you don't have to take care of all the nitty gritty of the publishing necessarily, where you're sending it to the printers and all the other stuff and mailing out all the copies and everything that you used to have to do with stuff
right.
like that. So that's the funner part, I guess, if there is something about a non-profitable
I,
profitable venture such as writing books.
I'll share something with you. I went to see a Broadway show, and I'm in line, and someone comes up to me and they go, "Hey, we get your magazine." And I go, "Oh, cool. You mean Good Day Sunshine?" They go, "Yeah, yeah." And I go, "Where are you guys located?" And they say, "Oh, we're from Connecticut." I go, "Oh, what's your name?" They tell me their name, and I go, "Oh, 44 Langham Road, Cheshire, Connecticut, 06410." They go, "What? How did you know that?" I go, "Oh, I'm really good with numbers." I didn't want to tell them that I personally hand addressed 20,000, 2,000, whatever it was in those days, because there
Excuse me.
wasn't a computer that turned out labels just yet. And I was writing their name, for how many years over and over every other month,
Yeah.
that if I by that point I knew everyone's name and address. If they were a subscriber and they've been with me for a while. I kind of knew them years later. You know, someone comes up to me at a convention or comes on the tour or comes to my book signing, whatever, and they go, you know, I'm Barbara so and so, and I'm from Shelton, and I used to get Good Day Sunshine, of course, Barbara, and I tell her last name, and I still remember that, and they're just shocked that I remember it. But that's the reason. In those days, you were hand addressing every single issue of the magazine's envelope that it came in.
I know we're supposed to be talking about your book, but I do have to ask you this: how big did Good Day Sunshine get? Did you have international subscribers and everything?
Oh yeah, we passed 5,000 subscribers at its peak, and I would have to print like 10,000 copies because we were in all the Tower record
Oh
stores,
yeah, I remember that. Yeah, yeah.
and then I would send to independent record stores who carried it all the time, and we would also send it overseas to places like Liverpool and any place that I thought was a cool record store. I wanted it in there,
Hmm.
and so yeah, there might have been magazines that were more informative, more professional,
Yeah.
that whatever word you want to use. I always say there was a magazine called Beatle Fan, which is still around and it's still great. And Bill King's a friend of mine, and I jokingly said, well, they're the New York Times of Beatle fandom, and I'm the New York Post. And if you know what the two papers are, yeah, I'm the fun one. I'm the one. I'm the one that's going to have
I thought you were
gossip.
going to say the Village Voice, but hey,
Oh,
same analogy.
interesting. Interesting. No, but the
Anyway,
analogy is such that I
yeah,
always paid respect to what I knew was a superior publication. If you were really needed all the Beatle facts, but if you wanted to have fun with a magazine
yeah.
and read fun articles, so I kind of think that we had the most readership for a little while, only because of my kind of international status and the fact that I was going to England every single year, and
Mm.
the readership was a little wider. But I'm not comparing in any which way. But that was at its peak, 5,000 plus subscribers and a 10,000 print run. Was very proud of that.
Do you happen to remember who might have been your biggest subscriber, paid or otherwise?
Yeah, there was this guy who was 6'8" and he weighed about 400 pounds. He was from Lexington, Kentucky. He was without a doubt. I met him years later. He was without a doubt my biggest subscriber.
Well, that wraps it up for today. No, seriously. I mean, you had people like Eddie Deason or something like that. Didn't you have people like that subscribing to you?
Right. So
Yeah.
okay.
So,
So that's
I
a good
mean,
question.
people
So
that you
yeah,
may
yeah.
have become friends with that
No,
uh,
I hear what you're
this is
saying.
leading back to your book a little bit. Anyway,
Oh, I think so. Good thinking. Yeah, good thinking. So I know every month, every issue, every other month we sent to Rick Springfield. I know that for sure.
cool.
But what we did, which you'll find interesting, Mark, is we sent copies to John, Paul, George, and Ringo every other month. And the
Mhm.
question was, well, are they getting them? Do they read them?
Yeah.
Well, Linda McCartney, who was the sweetest human that ever lived, and I loved her, and one of the hardest losses ever. She would always say, "Oh, Charles, yes, of course, you're Connecticut. I'm Scarsdale. We were almost neighbors." She would always say that. That was always so sweet of her to say.
That's
And
cool.
she goes, "Yes, of course, we get your magazine and we love it." Now, did they love it? Did they read it? Did they just look at the picture? I don't know. But she always said that. So that made me feel good. Years later, Ringo had put a large portion of his collection, because he just was downsizing and he wanted to raise money, and he put a large portion of his collection in an auction.
Mhm.
And I was blown away when one of the lots was a run of Good Day Sunshines,
Wow.
because it meant that he did get it,
Yeah.
and for him to have taken it out and put it in an auction
Yeah.
certainly meant
Well, it
that,
certainly didn't just go in the trash. At least he kept it
right.
long enough to resell it.
Right. And I don't know what it auctioned off for, but I know it was a heck of a lot more than I was selling the issues for. Because you'd want to pay more for the ones that were in the collection of Ringo Starr. That was pretty.
You got to think that they must have read it. I mean, you've seen the Beatles Get Back, the three-part series with Peter
Yes,
Jackson, right?
yes.
And there's more than one scene where Paul or one of them's reading the Beatles monthly book, and they're
Yeah.
they're kind of making fun of it, going, it's like Paul went to get a sandwich today, ho ho ho, or I'm making it up, but it's like they're just making
No.
fun of the little Beatle facts, and it's like, and then they're joking about letters from Beatle people. Ringo says, their little
And,
responses that they used to
yeah,
do.
I think I think no matter how big a star you are,
Yeah,
Mark, um, if you're getting something that's written about you,
yeah,
or that your ego, you got ego, you
yeah.
want to see, you want to read what the fans, if it's the letters to the editor, what they're complimenting or criticizing. It's always going to have news on their new releases, on all their new projects.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would think that they
They'd
read
probably
them.
say, let's see if they're covering old wave. They're
Right.
not. What? Flop. What? No. For any Beatle fan out there who likes Ringo, you'll know what I meant. Anyway,
Yeah.
but going back to Linda McCartney, she had a vested interest looking, because she was making the club sandwich. I mean, she was an active participant from what I've was told
Yeah,
about club
yeah, they both
sandwich.
they
Yeah.
both had final say, and she had a lot of input on Club Sandwich,
Yeah, and
which
which is why Paul ended it with her passing, because he couldn't carry
yeah,
on that by
yeah,
himself.
yeah,
So
absolutely. And for listeners who don't know, it was the Wings, or Paul's, fan club that they put out of
fun
London.
club.
The Fun Club,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah, I was very picky when I used to get magazines. I would try different Beatles ones over the years. Beatle fan, of course, was a constant, like you're saying.
Yeah,
I did get the Beatles monthly book when they were doing the newer issues for a while, but it got really expensive, so I had to stop.
sure.
And I did get Club Sandwich pretty much till the end.
Yeah.
But again, that was getting expensive too, because it's also from Europe and stuff. But I got yours all along, even after you stopped doing them,
Right,
because the
right,
last few
right.
you didn't do, I think,
Well,
or
the
like,
last few issues were taken over by a friend of mine named Matt Hurwitz. And it's
mhm,
kind of a sad story because he wrote the most amazing articles prior to the book, to Good Day Sunshine, him taking it over. My parents were getting really on in age, and I had to devote a lot more time to their care and their health. And I knew that I couldn't continue Good Day Sunshine at the level it was, because in those last issues I put out, they're over 100 pages, and they were scholarly, and they were as great. And his articles and a few other editors who were contributing on a regular basis were as good as what was out there.
yeah,
I don't remember if the internet was coming. Yeah, I think the internet had just started.
it was,
Right. So that was also a thought, that anything that was in a magazine might also, be accessible on the internet, which isn't entirely true, because obviously an article that's just written for a magazine is exclusive to that magazine. So it's not entirely true, but I kind of saw the end of the road the end of the long and winding road for Good Day Sunshine. And Matt said he wanted to take it over. And I just, people said that was the worst sale you ever made. I didn't sell it. I didn't sell it.
yeah,
We got together. He lived on the West Coast. I lived on the East Coast. We were friends. We would always see each other every year at the Beatle Fair in San Diego. He was consistently putting in great, articles, and I thought he is the definite heir to this magazine, and he will continue its legacy.
yeah,
We're still friends,
yeah,
but it's obviously a sore point to anyone who continued a subscription with him, because he couldn't. First of all, he has an allergy to. It's not a joke, to computer screens,
oh,
and he has issues with that. And I'm talking out of school here, and it's probably stuff that is private. And I'm
yeah,
sorry,
you
I'm
don't
doing
have to
that.
go into that level, but
Sorry that
um
we won't say how how
I will say this: at least you got a few more issues out from him.
got a
When my
few great
Harveyville was at
issues.
the end, I offered it to another person, which I won't name his name. He's still a friend of mine,
Uh,
and I'm still waiting for that next issue, number 76. You know, but
that's
I know
funny.
how it is. I mean, yeah, even we had Michael Ventrello on here, which is a mutual friend. Talking
Yeah,
about his Beatles book recently, and
yeah.
he was editor and publisher of Animato, an animation magazine, for a time,
Uh-huh.
and this other gentleman that I had on a different podcast was also the editor and publisher for a time. It's like, so everybody kind of shifted it around. But again, it was all a situation where, once the internet took over, I used to subscribe at my peak probably about 50 different magazines, plus
Yeah,
getting comic books at stores and stuff like that. I was
yeah.
just a fiend. And every fanzine I ever got just started dropping like flies. I mean, and now I get Beatle Fan because they still publish and it's still great.
Yeah.
And that's the
There's
only
another
Beatle related thing I get, because you know I don't want to
yeah.
try anymore, because they'll go away in about a year when they find out it's too hard to do.
There's another one that's been around for a very long time called Octopus's Garden.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And editor Tom is a sweet guy. He's also a New Englander,
Mhm.
and it started. I think it started more being New England centric, but now it's got a lot of the character of Good Day Sunshine, and some of the people who wrote for me, Bill Last and Mike Strito, write for that one too. The crossovers is that Janet Davis, who's an amazing editor and proofwriter, edited both, well, actually all three of my books, and is the editor of Octopus's Garden. So
Mm,
that's worth looking out. That's
mm,
one of the
okay.
ones I recommend. But you're right. All at its peak, I probably was getting about 70 fanzines.
Yeah.
40 or 50 of them were Beatles, and it got awkward for a while because when I started, I traded.
Mm,
Hey, you send me yours, I'll send you mine. You show me yours, I'll show you mine.
yeah, yeah.
And that was great with McCartney Observer and with a little help from my friends and Beatle Fan and Strawberry Field and all the major ones. But then I was getting ones that were, these Xeroxed Dark Horse Quarterly, which was on mom's mimeograph machine. You know what I mean?
I never
And
got that one, but I know
no,
I know
no,
the
no,
bad I know the bad ones. I
you
mean,
know which one I mean.
good ones that I got. I remember one that just popped in my head when you said that. It's a good one was the Harrison Alliance. That was a good
Harrison Alliance was great,
one. Yeah,
and that was a Connecticut one.
it
Jenny,
was. Wow.
Jenny and Patty, and
Hmm.
they're still around. I see them at concerts all the time, and I miss that one. That was a great one.
Yeah.
But yeah, but so many of them, just people, graduated from high school and realized there's a real life, and we love magazines and we love fanzines, but we can't put one out ourselves. If they gave it the old college try or the high school try.
Now you tilted the camera down so you can show us your Dr. Pepper and your cavern shirt. I mean, it's like
Cavern shirt.
you're
I
okay, okay,
I
oh,
want
okay.
to show,
I was gonna say
I
you
want
can't
to
see your
show the
eyes
cavern
anymore.
shirt
Okay.
earlier.
Oh, now it's out of focus. Get
Uh,
in focus. Oh, wave your hand.
uh-huh.
There we go. Hey, it goes out of focus as soon as you tilt down. That's crazy. Established 1957, the Cavern Club. Cool. All right, we saw it really quick. um, getting back to the book of top 10 Beatles lists, you talked about the people that aren't in the book, but who are some of the people that you were lucky to get in the book, and that are people that say, let's make it in a more positive note, if you waited 10, 20 more years you wouldn't have gotten. So I mean, who have you
Right,
gotten that are big in that book?
right. So what might be big for someone else might not be might be a so what for another person. And I say that because when I tell people, oh, I have Dave Winfield, baseball Hall of Fame, Major League.
Yeah,
What? How did you get him? He's a Beatle fan.
yeah.
And then you talk to the Beatle fans, oh, big deal. So it's interesting that type of question um, plays in so many different ways. I'll preface by saying I wanted to get it about a third of Beatle connected individuals, a third of Beatle family people, Beatle people who were connected to the Beatles history, and then a third of rock and rollers,
Yeah.
of people who are in the music industry who we all know and love. And the other third is not music, not Beatles, everyday celebrities, if there's such a thing as an everyday celebrity, like a Dave Winfield,
Yeah.
but also, Tommy Chong from Cheech and Chong, Butch Patrick from the Munsters, Dinah Manoff, the actress from Grease and Soap, Mackenzie Phillips, who I guess could fall into the rock and roll category because she was shortly one of the mamas and papas.
Yeah.
But that was the goal, to get a third of it of celebrities that if you weren't that diehard of a Beatle fan, you would still be interested in the book for its celebrity pop culture value.
Yeah.
A third of the rock and rollers, because that gives a book a lot of credibility. When you have,
Hmm.
Rock and Roll Hall of Famers and members of the Vanilla Fudge and the Cars and this one, it gives. And then, of course, for us diehards, we want to see what Pete Best puts in as his favorite, Beatles list, or Lawrence Juber from Wings. Now, me, from my end,
Yeah.
I was most proud of the dig deepers, the ones that I really had to work hard, not just to get their list, but to find. And the one that comes to mind is a gentleman who was on the same record label that the Beatles were, that wasn't Capitol. When they were releasing every hit on Capitol, these other little companies were sneaking out there. She Loves You on Swan, and Cry for a Shadow on Atco. Every possible way to release a Beatles record. And probably the second company that comes to mind was VJ,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they were introducing the Beatles, and they released those tracks in every possible way.
Yes.
With the Fourth Season, they released one album called The Beatles and Frank Ifield.
Right.
Frank Ifield was a fellow VJ recording artist who had a hit with I'll Remember You. The Beatles actually loved him very much and happened to be on the same label. And I tracked down Frank Ifield
Yeah.
through an agent, through a friend, and through a manager, who all refused and said he's too busy. He does gigs.
Hmm.
He does coffee houses. And
Huh.
I'm thinking, really? He's too busy? Come on. I mean, Tommy James is a rock and roll superstar and is playing concert. He wasn't too busy, but Frank Ifield, well, I found Frank Ifield's direct contact,
Yeah.
and he jumped at the opportunity to do it.
Wow.
And it's not just his list. Mark, this is what I think is a big selling point of the book. It's not just his list, it's the reasons why. So if he's telling a story of a certain song and he talks about John Lennon being at the Palladium
Mhm.
without a ticket, trying to get into a Frank Ifield show, I mean, that's something we haven't read in Ray Coleman's books. That's something we haven't heard. When Larry Kane tells his top 10, Larry Kane was one of the two journalists who
Right.
accompanied the Beatles on their early tours. Since a very well-respected newsman and an anchorman, Philadelphia mostly. And Larry's list is his top 10 concert shows that he saw of the Beatles and
Hmm.
why, which is that itself is worth, getting the book for. Um, and it's funny because he's in the book, there's a lot of synchronicity here. He's in the book, and so is Ivor Davis, who
Hmm.
we've gotten to
Yeah.
know through
Yeah.
Plastic DP, and he's a great guest on a lot of shows. Ivor and him were really the only journalists who were on at all the shows.
Hmm.
Larry being the US guy, Ivor being the British guy. Ivor is the only other guy who was, when the Beatles met Elvis, it was John Paul, George Ringo, Mal Evans, and Ivor.
Hmm.
And he gave me a list too. So once I got those like symmetric things, I got really excited because we got the two people on that. We got a few of the Quarrymen. We got 4 people connected to Badfinger.
Wow.
And when I think of getting like the harder ones, and I mentioned Frank Ifield, and his list is great, and only a true Beatle fan, will really know the connection through VJ. Only a true Beatle fan may know that before there was a Paul McCartney playing bass in the Beatles, there was a left-handed bassist for 1 week who did about 4 shows,
Oh yeah. I've heard that.
and his name was Chaz Newby.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
And we just lost
Yep, we
Chaz
just lost him.
in
Yeah.
May. He just passed away. And Chaz, I guess Stuart Sutcliffe was left behind in Hamburg. They
Right.
had some gigs. Paul hadn't moved over. So they thought, well, let's just get a replacement. And Chaz Newby came in and played bass with them. Stayed friends with the Quarrymen, stayed friends with Pete Best and the family for years. And we met last August. As you know, I do Beatle tours to Liverpool
Mhm.
every summer, www.liverpooltours.com. And I met Chaz at the unveiling of the Brian Epstein statue.
Hmm.
Apparently, Pete Best, I guess we'd met before, but I didn't know. I didn't know we met before. And he's played pretty regularly with the Quarrymen up until he passed away. So we got his list. We got Len Gary's list, who's a Quarryman, and we got Rod Davis, who's also one of the Quarrymen. So I got three of them, which was really special. But as far as the digging deep, I got four individuals associated with Badfinger or the Ivies. We got Joey Molland, of course, who was Badfinger. He
Yeah.
carries on the tradition, and
Right.
if you see Badfinger now, it's Joey.
Yeah.
Prior to Joey, there was a bass player, was it no, a guitarist in the Ivies,
Mhm.
who unceremoniously was let go in place of Joey Molland, and his name was Ron Griffith.
Mhm.
And Ron is got a list in the book. Well, the other two Badfinger connections, aside from Ron and from Joey Molland, is um, this guy Jeffrey Allen Ross,
Hmm.
who is Peter Asher's music director and touring pianist, and is a great musician in his own right. But Jeff Allen Ross is played in Badfinger when they were touring. He was a
Oh.
touring
Yeah.
of the band. And one other guy, just for a short while, Joey Molland wasn't on one or two of the albums. A guy by the name of Bob Jackson
Oh
was.
yeah. Yeah.
Bob lives in the UK, occasionally tours as Badfinger UK, which I'm sure pisses off Joey, and is a really great guy. He gave us a list too. So that's, you talk about digging deep into Beatles lore. Just today, I did a library appearance before our thing, and someone bought the book, and afterwards they ran up and I can't believe you've got this person in this book. I'm such a fan. I go,
Yeah.
who? I'm thinking, who is it? Is it Carmen Apps? Is it someone famous? He goes, you have Terry Draper in here. And I'm like, wow, do you know Terry Draper? Yes, I'm the biggest Klaatu fan on the planet.
I was
Well,
saying
you
that name
know,
sounded familiar, right? I couldn't put it until you said that. And I go,
right.
oh
Well,
yeah,
you
okay.
know, but listeners wouldn't know that Klaatu was the band that people thought, ooh, this was the big mystery. Let's reveal that it's really the Beatles recording under another name. All these radio stations that did the Is Paul Dead clues and all that, a few years later needed something else to latch on. And there was this Canadian band that, maybe sounded a little, I don't know, Badfinger, ELO, they all sound more like the Beatles. But anyway,
Yeah.
that Klaatu was the brainstorm of this guy, Terry Draper, and it
Yeah.
was a Canadian group. And he's still around, he's still recording, but I was able to get him to give me a list too. And the guy at the library today was blown away that, talk about digging deep, right? That he was in the book alongside of all these more famous people.
I don't know. I guess I assume, because they're in the book, that all these people are Beatles fans. It is kind of interesting. Everybody always says, "Oh, I'm a Beatles fan," and then you really kind of nail them down on it, and they don't really know much at all. So, you know,
Yeah, yeah. I was pleasantly surprised. You wouldn't think that Darren McDaniel from Run DMC
Mhm.
is as big a Beatles and Ringo fan as he is. And I loved getting those out of the box Run DMC, Tommy Chong from Cheech and Chong, the ones that, what? I mean, you wouldn't think that those people are Beatle fans and would be astute enough to come
Yeah.
up with a list with reasons why.
Well, even
Uh,
Chong's affiliated with the Beatles in that Basketball Jones. It was
yeah,
produced by George, wasn't it, or George played on it? What was it, or
played
both?
lead guitar on it. They
Yeah,
were on the same
there we
label
go.
and they're in the same studio. And George came over with Tom Scott with the whole gang
Yeah.
and added to that one. Yes,
And then I
that's
found this out more recently. I didn't know this. It was Bob O'Brien had posted it. He's a singles collector and he's the 45s collector. And he posts on Facebook little rare factoids. He posted that Tommy Chong was in this group on Motown, and he actually wrote it wasn't a big hit, but a semi-hit song for Motown. This is years before Cheech and Chong, sometime in the 60s. And you can't even tell it's him because it's like the Temptations. It's like 5 or 6 guys with little suits,
Yeah,
and they have guitars and sax and whatever. It's like, so I didn't know Chong was that affiliated with music. I always thought it was Cheech that was the music guy and always pushing, let's do Earache My Eye, let's do Born in East LA. And Chong was like, yeah, whatever. It turns out Chong was the music guy,
yeah.
so,
And he prides himself on that. It's
yeah,
one of the few interviews, that I couldn't get him to write it down. Most people emailed me their lists.
yeah,
They sent it on a sheet by me. Him, I had to interview as we're doing now. We did a
yeah.
Zoom, and he was great, and he went on tangents, and you knew that he had such affection for Harrison. I mean, Lennon and Harrison were his two biggies. Who, interestingly enough, Brute Force. Um,
King of Pho.
Stephen Friedland, yeah, was an Apple recording artist, and what made me think of it is George and John both fell in love with his song "King of Pho" because that's their type of humor,
Yeah.
and he's in the book too, and he's a great guy. I'm just so proud of the people who gave me their lists because it spans from the ones you would most suspect. Another one you would least suspect, Sister Sledge, We Are Family.
Oh
I
yeah.
have I have a list from Kim Sledge.
Excuse me.
I know he's getting choked up
I
off.
know.
I get it. I get it.
We are families. Come on, sing it with me. No,
I
anyway.
got all my sisters.
Anyway, um, total aside, but it's Beatles related. I saw Ringo last Friday night. Believe it or not.
Wow,
Yeah.
wasn't he
So
great?
he was great.
Okay,
And
I'll throw a trivia thing at you.
okay.
One person from his current band is in my book. Can you guess which member?
Hmm. Hamish Stewart.
Absolutely wrong.
Oops. It just seems like he would be the most likely to do it, but
Because he was
uh
with
Colin Hay, then that's my second guess, and then I won't
no,
guess.
wrong. That's two wrongs. You got
Okay.
to.
All right. Who is it?
It's Greg Bissonette,
Oh, the drummer. Oh, okay. I wasn't even thinking about that.
his fellow drummer.
Yeah.
Greg is just he worships Ringo, and
Yeah.
it's so legitimate. I mean, he loves him so much. His list, he gave me a great list. That was neat. Is getting Greg Bissonette from Ringo's band,
Yeah.
Lawrence Huber from Paul's band. That was a nice touch. Getting those people who were connected with the
Yeah.
Beatles.
Yeah, that was the first time I saw Greg because I think the last time I saw Ringo, I've seen Ringo now 6 times, but
Yeah.
there was a long gap. So I think the last time I saw Ringo, Sheila E. was doing the drumming.
Oh,
So
that's been a
yeah,
while.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I know way, way back, Jim Keltner did the drumming. Obviously Ringo did drumming too, if you've never seen him. But I know you have, but I mean, viewers out there. And if you haven't seen Ringo, he's 83 in a month. Go see him because he's worth it.
Because he's only going to be doing it for 20 more years.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't want to see him when he's over 100. You want to see him now when he's still got energy and he's in his
Exactly.
prime. And he's in his prime.
Actually, what was amazing to me is not that he could sing the whole time, is at the end he still does the jumping jacks and you know can
Yes.
run off stage and run back on stage and you know all sorts of things. It's like and play the drums. He still plays the drums. Take that, Phil Collins. Anyway, I
Yeah.
shouldn't do that. I shouldn't badmouth Phil
What's
Collins.
Phil, what's Phil Collins' connection with the Beatles?
He was in the balcony in A Hard Day's Night.
Correct. Good
And
job.
he hosted the documentary called "You Can't Do That." If you,
He sure did. Yeah.
later on when he was
More,
famous.
more street cred for being in A Hard Day's Night, definitely.
Yeah. You didn't get him for the book, did
I didn't. And I didn't
Okay.
even, he's not one of the ones who rejected me because that could be a separate book.
Yeah.
I didn't even no, I didn't reach out to him. The one that I like telling about is one person I reached out to who's probably the biggest name in Broadway. Mr. Hamilton himself.
Oh yeah.
I saw him at the 92nd Street Y talking about his history and his upbringing and everything else. It's just fascinating, amazing, brilliant individual. And Lin-Manuel Miranda talked about how he loved the Beatles growing up, and that shocked me. I'm like, really? Because you don't hear it in any of the stuff. And so I had to write to him. And
Yeah.
when I knew he was appearing, I I put a letter in an envelope and I presented it to when you're in one of those events, they take questions from the audience and then they pick which ones. So the people who were going around taking the questions from the audience said, "Here, can you make sure he gets this?" And I gave them an envelope, and I don't know if they did.
Oh.
At the door there was a bodyguard, so I gave him one. And then before Lin Manuel left, I found his chauffeur, his limo. I gave him one. So I already got three hopefuls out to him, and I didn't get a response.
Hmm.
And then so I dug a little further because when I get on a binge where I need to get somebody one way or another, when I heard him talk Beatles, and so I sent it to his theater, to an office, and to his bookstore.
Hmm.
And I got a response, and it was the nicest letter. And
Hmm.
he sent me an autograph, and he apologized, and he said, "Here you go. I'm not up for doing the list, but thank you anyway." I'll take that.
Hey, that's good.
To get his autograph and to get the acknowledgement, that was pretty cool.
Now you've told the second story about this person on this podcast, because if you listen to the Sam Viviano episode, who was a longtime art editor at Mad Magazine, he was a big fan of Hamilton and everything, when it first started and everything like that, started seeing all the shows and everything.
Yeah,
Dick
yeah.
DiBartolo was a big fan, and
Wow.
he's been on the podcast here. They got him to show up at the Mad offices like a week before they closed the New York offices and moved to LA.
Oh
And
my
Sam
gosh.
Sam Viviano tells the story much better, so listen to that podcast episode. But it's like he didn't come in with a big entourage. He just came in with his schoolboy, his buddy that was also a huge Mad fan. And so they
Wow.
just so the cool thing about him is, even if he didn't give you a list, he's like one of us. He's just a fan of all this pop culture stuff we all like, Mad
Well,
Magazine.
I'm glad you mentioned
You know,
that magazine called Mad, because before I ever put out Good Day Sunshine, before I became a publisher and an author like you are, and put out 3 books, I have a long ways to go to reach you. I was a published a letter writer
letter
in
hack, yes.
in Mad Magazine. I don't know the number, but it's the Towering Inferno
Yeah,
cover.
I know. I was going to say I know the number because I've written the Mad book. So, and you're listed in my Mad book as a
Um,
celebrity. So it is Mad 177. Yes, it's the Towering Inferno cover with Alfred roasting a marshmallow in the building. And yeah, I was shocked because I was just kind of going through every issue, and there's certain letters that you expect because it's like, I think there's a letter from Leonard Nimoy when Star Trek was on. Well, it's like, yeah, Star Trek's big and he's big, and they write a letter. But no, and but the odd thing about going through the whole Mad thing is I found Rick Moranis had a letter in issue 120 in
wow,
1968. He wasn't in SCTV, he wasn't in any films, he wasn't an actor, he was just a kid. And it was
wow.
signed Ricky Moranis, and I forgot where it was, Toronto, Canada or something. I said, it's got to be him, because how many people are named that and Canadian, and if it's not him, so anyway, I'm flipping through, and yeah, 177 comes along, and I see Charles F. Rosenay, and it says blah blah Connecticut. I don't know where your city was at the time, and I said, that's got to be him too. you know
Yes.
and so it's like, you made it into the book. There's only a couple times when I was going through the letters page where I kind of questioned it. I know one time there was a letter from Abe Lincoln. I know that was a fake, but there was a couple times in early days of Mad where it's like, I don't know, Mad was big enough yet. But later on, you know all
I was
bets were off. All bets were off. If
oh,
it's like they got a letter once from Charles Schultz, which I talked about, that
yeah.
they started doing so many Charlie Brown and Peanuts parodies that he sent in a letter with a Snoopy drawing. He says, you guys are doing so well. Why don't you just take over the strip and so I can retire, something to that effect. And they published it because hey, it's Charles Schultz. So Yeah.
I don't remember the wording of mine, but I know that you had to have been a mad follower and a mad reader to get it.
Yeah.
You know, because it parodied two things, like whoever heard of whatever, or and the folding of the back. I forgot what it was,
Yeah.
but I'd forgotten it, Mark. I'd forgotten that I did that until someone brought it to my attention years later, and I said, "You sure?"
Yeah.
I really disputed them, and they got the issue and sent it to me, and I'm like, wow, I was so pleased. I thought maybe I wrote to Famous Monsters of Filmland, or
Yeah.
I didn't remember writing to Mad. So
Yeah.
that was my first, yeah, first published piece was Mad
Uh,
Magazine.
I never wrote too many letters. I did write a couple to Mad. They never got published. One time, I don't know if you knew this about Mad. Traditionally, if you wrote a letter, you probably wrote a letter based on what happened in issue 175
Yes,
for publication. There were always two issues off.
yes,
And so I had written for one of the issues, and I think it was around that same time, and it was supposed to appear in 178 if my letter did appear, and instead they didn't run a letters column that issue. They did this art instruction parody where they had the regular Mad artists draw a horse, and they all drew it in their own inimitable styles and everything like that. And then the joke was, not an ounce of talent in the whole bunch, sign them up quick. And it's like, it was funny, but I said, damn it, my letter's not going to get published.
that
And
would
it
have
never
been the
did.
issue that you were in,
Yeah.
and we would have been in.
Yeah.
This is more of our
Yeah.
crossover stuff here.
However, I
Yeah.
did get, and I didn't even know I got this at the time. It was a few years later. The competitor, Crazy Magazine from Marvel Comics.
Yes.
I'm in issue number 57 in 1979. So,
Oh, so
and
if
I
you
do
did,
remember what I wrote because Mad put out paperback books, the little pocket size. And
yes.
so I said, um, you know, something to the effect that, could you put out paperback books? And the editor wrote his funny wise guy answer, where do you want us to put them? Anyway. And I go, well, at least I got published. So
That's
it says
great.
Mark Arnold, Saratoga, California. So you'll see it if you ever look
Tremendous,
at that one. So,
tremendous.
which is where you would have sent your good day sunshines if you remember the addresses. It probably was at Saratoga. Well, probably was in San Francisco too at the time. But anyway, that's way back when, 2 years ago. Anyway, let's see. Well, I know one of the books on the in your future, but other than that one, which we can talk about in a minute, do you have any other books in the planning at this time
It's really funny because I'm getting a.
that you
Are you
could
gonna
talk
do?
about? I know there's some.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm getting a. Am I going to do a book of top 10 monkey list? I'm going to do a top 10 Beach Boys list. I don't know. It would make sense to do like a series of these.
Hmm.
But am I going to go back to the well? Am I going to ask Gary Puckett and Ron Dante and Walter Egan? They've been so good to me. Am I going to really annoy them with? I don't know if the words annoy, but to give me list after list after list. I think that if I don't know, I would love to do book of top 10 New York Mets list or something, where people gave me their favorite moments of the amazing Mets through the years, whether it be how bad they were in 62 or the remembrances of 69. When I do my library appearances, I say, growing up, three things. It was the Beatles, it was the Monsters, and it was baseball. That was everything until I discovered girls. That's the only thing that mattered, is those two things. So if I did another book, maybe that would be the one. But it's the ones that you and I are working on that I'm really excited about. One
Yeah.
which may or may not never happen, and
Yeah.
then and one that hopefully will be out this year.
Yeah.
And it's
Well, that
very.
one we can talk about if you want to talk about it now.
Uh,
Um,
I would like to save it for another show,
okay.
but let's put out
We
that
can give the title at least.
I would love for you to give us the title.
Okay, so we are working on a book. It's in the typesetting formatting stage and it's called Not Just Happy Together, The story of the turtles. How did we have that? I know it's not just happy together is the first part.
The
I don't even know
Turtles,
the title of our own
the
book. What?
Turtles from A to Z, AM radio to Zappa.
That's right. I forgot.
And yeah, yeah.
You're like Michael
Yeah.
Ventrella, who I co-wrote. It's all these long ass titles, and I was like, it's the monkeys book, it's the turtles book.
Well,
Anyway, yeah.
officially, the Beatles book is celebrities, actors, athletes, mods, and rockers. The book of top 10 Beatles lists. But when you don't put the title first, it's a problem. And I did monsters, celebrities, actors, athletes, and rock stars, the book of top 10 horror lists, because it's cool to do that, hyphen and give the book a further title. And it works with the Not So Happy Together. But it's going to be really exciting. If anyone is a music aficionado, loves the Turtles, loves the music of that era, they're going to get so much great information. It's not just there's history there. It's a discography. We did so many great interviews with so many people connected to the Turtles in all those years.
Some of
And
them on this very podcast. Anyway,
and Mark, I'm very proud because you went the Beatle fan route and I went the Good Day Sunshine route. And what do I mean by that? We both really wrote little commentary on just about every Turtle song, and it's not just the five hits. There's a lot of songs out there. You would write what was informative and educational, and then I would write something silly.
you no.
And if someone knows us, they are going to love this book. They're
Yeah,
really going to love it, even if they're not Turtles fans,
yeah,
because there's so much of our personalities and our heart went into this book.
yeah.
And I think it's going to really stand out for that reason. But anyway, so that, yeah, hopefully we'll see that before the
Well,
end of the year.
anybody I've ever brought it up to, they say one of two things.
Yeah,
They either say, "Oh, I love the turtles," and I go, "Wow, I didn't know there's that many Turtles fans." And they
yeah,
rattle off some of the songs, and it's
yeah.
usually not just Happy Together, it's other stuff. And I go, "Okay, you
Okay.
know your stuff." And
Mhm.
then the follow-up question usually is, "Are you gonna have Zappa in there?" And I go, "Of course." And then they go, "All right, I'm getting your book," and it's
Oh,
like,
great.
so those are like the two things. Everybody's a fan, and they want Zappa in it. And it's like yes to both. So it's like,
Tremendous, tremendous.
you know,
I think I just sent you a picture I'd never seen before of Flo and Eddie with Frank Zappa. I don't know if I forwarded that to you or not.
yeah, I saw that. Yeah, yeah. I don't know if we can use it, but it's a little too
No,
late.
no, no, no. We're not going to use it. Our book's done. There's no more
Yeah,
using it.
I will say this, without spoiling it. There are some very rare photos in the book. I
Yes,
made sure, other than the requisite album covers and single picture sleeves that you have to put in these type of things,
yes.
to get some rare images,
Yep.
and we had to go special, you know, ways and special trades and special agreements and everything to get some of these photos. So,
Yeah.
it'll
Well,
be,
some are from fans, which are really cool,
yeah,
and then some are from real. I mean, the biggest. You can't get bigger than Henry Diltz, who we're
yeah,
honored to have the cover front and back
yeah,
from the famous Monkees, Turtles, rock and roll, Doors, you name it.
yeah. And they're photos you have not seen. I guarantee you have
Correct.
not these seen. Well, you've seen them, but yeah.
I'm getting more excited just listening about the book.
Oops, we
I
weren't
can't,
supposed to talk about it. Anyway, no, we
can't
will
wait
talk
till
about it again when it comes out later this year. We will do a full official show, and we might
yeah.
even have like Michael Ventrella as a fan to talk about it too, because he's a big Turtles fan. He had Howard Kalin do the forward to our Monkeys book, so he has a connection there. So it's like we can all jibber jabber about the turtles when it's time.
And you and I can do that, and instead of one of us being the interviewee and the other one being the interviewer, we could both be the people who get interviewed.
I'll have Michael interview us. Yeah, that'll work. You'll do it.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Cool. All right. What else do we got to talk about? I mean, I could just ramble on, but I mean, it's a nice, short, and sweet show. So I would say how we wrap up every show, give another plug to all three of your books and how people can contact with you, and if you're doing any public appearances in July or later, because June will
Yeah.
probably be done by the time this comes up.
Sure.
And have the floor.
Thank you. Well, the first book I put out, which we've talked about in the past, was my first book, the book of top 10 horror lists, which begat this book. And it was also, celebrities gave me their top 10 favorite horror themes. 9 chapters were Beatles, which sort of placated my Beatle friends and fans till this book came out. And 9 chapters were, monkeys related in one way or another. So even the horror book was very music centric, was very big for people who love celebrity and pop culture. And that was released by Bear Manor Media. And I mentioned that so then when this comes out, I can now I can share this interview on all their pages for
And
the
most of
thousand.
my books also come from Bear Manor Media.
Yes,
Not
yes,
all, but most. Anyway,
most.
go ahead.
And then I'd gotten really very involved with the paranormal. And I sneaked a book in between called True Ghost Stories of Connecticut. And very well received, and it sold a ton of copies because it's not your typical these are the places in Connecticut that are haunted and here's their history. Instead, individuals gave stories of what happened to them in connection with these places. 2, 3 chapters are my own, and that I'll tell you what the criteria was. Every story in the book had to have something to do with Connecticut. It's my home state, and it's one of the most haunted states in America. The other barometer was it had to be true. I didn't want people to embellish it. I didn't want people to make up story. I didn't want them to add to it. They gave me the stories. I edited them. I added illustrations, and I put those out. In fact, firsthand paranormal accounts by the individuals who experienced these occurrences. That was published by Kiwi Publishing. The first book of top 10 horror lists, is available from www.bookoftop10horrorlists.com. I'm sure you're going to run a scroll underneath. The second book, True Ghost Stories of Connecticut, is available from www.paranormalconnecticut.com. And the book we're talking about and focusing on, and probably of most interest to Beatle fans and your listeners and viewers, is the book of top 10 Beatles lists. And who would believe, but the website is www.bookoftop10, the number 10, not TEN, bookoftop10beatleslists.com. Having said that, all 3 of those books are available on Amazon. So, if you have Amazon Prime, you can get the shipping for free, and you can probably get those overnighted to you and all that. What you can't get is my signature. And as you know, Mark, as being an author, people want our very valuable signatures. People love getting signed books. So if you want to get those, you get them directly through us. If you want to get them just quicker and faster and cheaper, you can get it through through Amazon. I will be appearing on July 22nd at Fab Fest, which is Charlotte, North Carolina's Beatles Festival. I will be there this year as a special guest, thanks to Daniel Costin, one of our friends, and doing a lot of non-Beatle conventions and a lot of libraries. But that's the only one where I'll be. That's specifically a Beatles festival. The website is www.fabfestcharlotte.org. I'll be a special guest there. At the end of the month, I'm doing a show with Mickey Dolans and some other great guests, Butch Patrick. But I think that'll have passed by the time this airs, and that's in Boxborough, Massachusetts.
When's that one anyway?
The last weekend of June into July 2nd.
Make this work. Well, I can put this on before that, but when it is again, the dates?
Yeah, June 28th, 29th, 30th. Wait, no, let me look exactly. It's NE Musicon.
Yeah.
It's in Boxborough, Massachusetts. It's put on by our friend Gary Summers, and it's June 30th, 31st, and whatever July. It's 4th of July prior weekend.
All right.
That's how you look it up. I don't know the exact date, damn it. I'll be there.
I will put this show. I can shuffle shows around, and I've done it for you in the past. So when something's important like Melanie or whatever, I will shuffle a show around just so I
I
can get that extra promotion.
I appreciate the shuffle. So hope to see you at the NE Music Con, which is all people who put on the NE and two letters NE, not NEANY, NE collector shows, Comic Cons, all that good stuff. And it's going to be Mickey Dolenz, Michael DeBar, Butch Patrick, slew of really great guests, and then on the bottom of the list, me as an author. So we'll all be there, and
Also
then
random.
that list. Guys, if you ever want to come with me to England, every August I do the Beatles tours, and we've been doing that every year since '83. So it's
Oh,
our 40th anniversary. This year we're sold out. So you can come next year when is it next year? 1984?
2024.
2024. Thank you. I'm still living in the past.
1984.
2024.
Ooh, 1984 next year.
It's called the Magical History
It's the
Tour.
magical time
And it's
machine tour. We're going back in time.
on the
Ooh,
website at www.liverpooltours.com. And that's enough promoting because I
sounds
thank
good.
you for having me on, Mark. And I think we're popped in that hour. I think we're really right on the nose here.
Yep. All right. Well, I thank you, Charles, for being my special guest. And, I'll probably see you again in a few months when we're promoting the Turtles book. Or if you have another musical guest you want to send my way, I'll certainly entertain them and interview them. And I want to thank you for being my guest today. And that wraps it up for another Fun Ideas podcast. And we'll see you next time.